All right, we are going to start this workshop with a little bit of color mixing. So I'm going to move my canvas over for just a moment. What you're going to want for this workshop is pretty much 3 colors. Okay, so I want you to pick a main color for your design. I've picked this Grecian blue. And so I'm going to base the entire design on this one color. What we're going to do is create a gradient from Grecian blue up to a really light blue using white. So the 2 main colors I need is my Grecian blue and white, and that's what I'm going to base everything on. Now you can choose any color and make a gradient because we're just mixing with white. So for example, you could use gold and mix with white and have a gradient of golds. You could choose magentas, you could choose an avocado, any color that you want, okay? And then once you pick out your main color, what you want to do is find just a darker shade. So this is going to be my main color, and this is going to be my background color. And so I'm just going to, as far as color mixing, I've got this little 6-cup palette here that I'm going to use. I'm going to take my background color and I'm just going to put a pinch of that in number 6. And then I'm going to set that aside. Okay, so your background color is the deepest, darkest color, and I want to keep the palette pretty consistent. So I'm just going to add a pinch of that in there just to darken my number 6 color. And then my number 6 color is going to be mostly this Grecian blue. This is my main color for the design. So I'm going to fill up that cup most of the way. Okay. If you see a little bit of fluid in here, just know that I put a little bit of flow medium in there, not required at all, but I use Floetrol, and I don't use very much, just enough to coat the bottom. And then what I'm going to do here is up at this far end, I'm going to take my white and I'm going to fill this cup up mostly with white. Okay. And then we're going to create a gradient going down. So with this one, I'm going to add mostly blue and just a little hint of white. Mostly blue and then a little more white. And so there's no exact formula, guys, but we're just creating a light to dark here. So I'm going to start over on the dark end. I'm going to mix this up. I might add just another pinch of this background color. I want my colors to be pretty equal as far as the gradient goes, but I can adjust them after I start mixing. So here's 6. There's 5. There's 4. And 3. And 2. And 1. 1 should just be a little hint of blue. There we go. I think I did pretty good with that. They look pretty even to me. You can always adjust your colors. White is always going to be the lightest of the pigments. So whatever color you chose, use very sparingly if you need to adjust your colors. I think mine look pretty good. Right here, things are feeling a little close. So I might add just a pinch of this over here. Maybe a pinch of this lighter color in number 2. So you can play with it a little bit. There's no right or wrong. But you just want to kind of get your gradient where you're happy. What I'm going to do now is just close these and set them aside so I can paint my background. And I'm going to number them 1 through 6 because I realize I don't want to call them different shades of blue because you may not be using blue. So we're going to use a gradient of 6. I'm going to set that aside. And then what you want to do is just paint your background in your dark color. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll move on to making the guidelines. Make sure if you have a canvas with sides, you get the sides, and I recommend 2 coats on your canvas or on your surface just to make sure that you have good coverage. You can put your base color aside, as we're really not going to use that for anything else, but perhaps you'll need it when you're finished for a few touch-ups. All right, now we're going to make our grid or our outline here, so we know how to make our pattern fall evenly. So I'm going to take a ruler. I've got the center of my circle marked, and what I'm going to do is just take my chalk pencil and I'm going to make a mark every 1/2 inch out from that center. Right, and then I've got a compass. Now I've got a big honking compass here. You can certainly just use, you know, the small kind that you get at any school supply store. And I'm going to make my first circle here at 1.5 inches because I really don't need, because I'm using a mirror in the center, I don't need anything smaller than that. And then after my 1.5 inch mark, I'm going to make marks at every 1/2 inch all the way out. If you don't have a compass, no worries. I know some of you may have dotting stencils, and if you want to just go ahead and set up your grid line for the dotting stencil, once you get started, you can pretty much work off of the center of the design and keep things pretty even. So I'm going to start here with these circles, and then I'm going to add my stencil grid next. All right. So there is that. And then, like I said, next we're going to add our lines, our stencil grid lines. And what you really need here, you can put the set of 16 if you need the extra lines to keep things safe. If you're using a different stencil than I am, really it's important that you have the 8 lines. You can get away with 8. If you've got 16, even better. All right, so this is what I ended up with and I'm going to work from. And again, if you don't have the concentric rings, that is absolutely fine. Those are just there to guide us, but once we get the pattern going, you can use the pattern to help guide you as well. So don't stress about that. I'm just extending my lines a little bit. So I'm just going to extend my main 8 to help me out as I go. And then, of course, we've got this beautiful mirrored center. Now, I'm not going to leave this here as we work because I know it's going to reflect the light. So we're going to glue this on after our design is complete, but I'm just going to set this baby right in the center so that visually you can see what we're creating. And so I'm going to grab my Mandala tools and get everything set up, and then we're going to go ahead and get started with the actual design building. All right, so I've got my paints. I'm all set up and ready to go. Make sure I'm centered here. And what we're going to do first is I'm going to grab a 4mm tool and my number 6 paint. And what we're going to do is we're going to go around our center here. So I'm going to do, I always start with my cardinal points. So north, south, east, and west. And then halfway, and we're going to fill this up with these 4mm dots. So I did north, south, east, and west, and then halfway, so northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. And then again, we've got a line halfway between. So we're going to dot on all of those. That gives us 16. Remember to dip and dot each time. That keeps the dot sizes consistent. And then I am going to go in between each of these one more time. That will give us 32. So we're going to end up with 32 dots, 4mm, in our number 6 color. Next, what you're going to need is a number 5 or 5mm tool, and then you want to get a small stylus. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a number 5 with our number 5. So we're going to go down one color. And in between, we're going to make our next circle offset. So it's going to be in between the previous row. We're going to make a dot. And we're going to take a small stylus and we're going to pull that into a pin right in between that previous row. And you can do a few at a time. And just to give you an idea for spacing, this puts me just below that next ring. So you can do 3 or 4 at a time. I wouldn't do the whole circle and then go back, because when you do that, your paint starts to dry and it'll get clumpy when you pull it. So do a few at a time if you want to. I typically will work in sets of 4s because that multiple goes into the 32 and the 16 and the 8 patterns that we're working with. You do have to dip before every dot. Don't forget, that will keep your sizing nice and consistent. we're going to go all the way around our circle. So that was 5mm with our number 5 paint color. Next, I'm going to grab a 7mm tool, and we're going to use our number 4 color. And I'm going to make a dot in between again. So we're going to go out one more circle. But this time I'm going to do just the lines only. So I've got 16 lines. So I'm going to make a dot, skip a space, and go to the next line. Make a dot, skip a space, next line. You get the idea. So we're going to dip and dot each and every time. Skip a space, go to the line. We're going to do this all the way around, so we're going to end up with 16 of our dots in our number 4 color. So what we're going to do now with these dots here is we are going to get a 3mm tool. You can either use a rod, or if you've got a 3mm stylus, that's fine as well. I'm going to start with the center dots. We're going to walk the dots here, but I like to start with my centers when I walk the dots. I'm going to use my number 3 color. So I'm going to use a 3mm tool, either a rod or a stylus, and my number 3 color. And I'm going to place that center dot in the middle of each of those previous dots we just did. All right, so those are going to be my center dots, and then we're going to walk the dots on each side. So the center's 3mm, so I'm going to go down just one size from a 3mm to a 2.5, and I'm going to walk the dots on each side. And I can't fit very many, so I've got 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do 4 on each side, redip, do 4 on the other side. And we're going to do this all the way around. Got a few splatters going on here. Be careful of splatter. Careful not to dip in the wrong color. Usually I keep my paint pots closed, and I did not do that. So just be careful to make sure you're using the right color at the right time. All right, so we walk those dots all the way around. Next, I'm going to use a 4mm tool, and we are going to use our number 2 paint. And I'm going to repeat this process. I'm going to do the center dot with a 4mm tool. And our number 2 paint, we're going to go all the way around with the center, and then we're going to walk the dots on each side. So I've got all my centers, and that was 4mm. I'm going to go down one size to walk the dots. So I'm going to use a 3mm and walk the dots on each side. I can fit 5 comfortably, so I'm going to walk 5 on each side. So you dip once and walk, dip again, and then walk on the other side. We're going to do this all the way around. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go down to our number 1 color, and we're going to add a swipe in between each one of these petals. So I'm going to choose a smaller stylus, so about a 1.5mm is what I'm going to use, and we are going to make a swipe with our number 1 color. Now you'll see that right in a little higher than the middle of the petal, we've got this circle, and I'm going to start my swipe here and go inward. If your spacing is a little different, that's absolutely fine, but I'm going to add swipes, dip and swipe, dip and swipe. We're going to do this all the way around in between those petals with our number 1 color. next I'm going to go back to my marking pencil, and the reason why I'm going to do this is because I want to make sure my mirror placement is good. And so what we're going to do is, in a few more steps, we're going to add a mirror in here, a small round mirror. And so I want to make sure that line falls where it's supposed to be. And so we want to line up. As you can see, we've got that swipe which points right to our first set of dots here in the center. And so we're going to follow that line outward, and I'm just going to mark that. If you're good at visualizing, you may not have to mark your line, but basically everywhere there's a swipe, there should be a line, and the ray should come out from this darkest dot closest to the inside mirror. So right like this. All right, and that is going to help us place the next 2 dots that we need to put in here. And so I'm going to grab my 6mm tool, and we're going to do a set of double dots in between each of these petals. And so this line here is going to be where we kind of have it divided. So I'm going to place 1 dot to the left and 1 dot to the right. So this is a 6mm tool and my number 1 paint. And so I've got my petal here. There's the line. I'm going to add 1 to the right and 1 to the left. And you'll see that line goes right through the middle. And I'm going to follow this pattern all the way around. 1 to the right of that line, 1 to the left. All right, for the next step here, I am going to grab my mirrors. You're going to need 16 of the 1-inch mirrors. I'm sorry, these are 3/4 of an inch. 16 of the 3/4 inch mirrors that I've got here. And we're going to place these down, but we're not going to glue them until our piece is completely dry. But I'm going to place mine upside down because I don't want you to see the reflection. I don't want you to have to deal with the flash of the reflection. And so what we're going to do is put these right next to that set of double dots that we just created. And so kind of center that in. One of the reasons why I like to work with the mirror on the piece versus drawing it and coming back to it is I tend to leave a little more room around the mirror if it's on the piece. Otherwise I get really tight with the design and it's hard to go after the fact and add on that mirror. So we're going to add all 16 of these on, get them nice and centered where we want them to be. Here we go. And then once you place them, just give it a little glance over, make sure you've got them evenly spaced, things look good. And just as we're working, be very careful not to bump them. Next, what we're going to do is walk the dots around these circles. And I'm going to start with a large center dot. I'm going to use a 5mm tool, and I'm going to use my number 1 paint. And so I'm going to carefully place my center dot, and if we did things right, and it's okay if your spacing's a little different from mine, but my center dot should fall right on this last line that I made. So we end up with 16 of those center dots. And then because I'm working a little larger when I walk the dots here, I'm going to grab a 4mm tool, and I'm going to add 1 dot on each side. Same color, number 1. So dip and dot on each side of that center dot with your 4mm tool. So we've got a 5mm center, then 4. I'm going to grab my 3mm stylus. I'm going to dip in my number 1 color, and we're going to walk the dots on each side. So dip and walk, and then dip and walk. And we're going to do this all the way around. I really love these big, bold dots. I like walking the dots with larger sizes. I much prefer that over the smaller ones. All right, next we're going to do some swoops. We're going to use our number 2 color, and I'm going to use a 2 to 2.5 millimeter. Mine's going to be 2.5. Use your best judgment according to your spacing. 2.5 millimeter stylus, my number 2 paint, and what I'm going to do is we've got this ring about halfway down our petal. That's where I'm going to start my swoop. And if you need to, if you run out of paint, you can get a smaller stylus and kind of trick that all the way down. Coax it down if you need to. I cheat a little bit by using that small stylus to finish the swipe or the swoop. Depending on your surface, you may not need to do that. I'm using canvas, so it's got a little bit of a texture to it, and that makes the swoop a little more difficult to get where it's going. There's no shame in your swoop game if you gotta cheat it a little bit. All right, in between these swipes, right in here, we're going to revisit that space a little bit later. Right now, we're going to continue building outwards. I'm going to move on to my number 3 color, and we're going to start doing some pins. The pins should fall in between each of these swipes. There will be 16 of them, so they're offset between the mirrors. So I'm just marking this so you can visually see where they're going. You can choose to mark on your piece or not. So we've got each of these petals with the mirrors all the way around, and in between that, we're going to start our first pin. Our center pin is going to be our 8mm tool and our number 3 color. And I don't want this to go all the way out to the edge. I've got this final ring marked on my canvas here, and I'm going to go just beyond that. So we're going to dip and dot. I'm going to do a couple dots first before I pull this pin. It's a little faster that way, but remember, don't make too many because then they'll dry. I'm going to grab a stylus tool, dip in the paint, and I'm just going to pull this pin inward. I'm going to do the next set, and we're going to work this all the way around. So 8mm dots, pull them into a pin. We're going to add pins on each side of these, or swoops, or swipes, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to grab a 4mm tool. Let's see, 4 millimeters. And I'm going to use my number 4 paint. And what I'm going to do is add 4 millimeters on each side. So dot, dot. And then I'm going to take my small stylus and pull this inward. So dot, dip and dot, dip and dot. We pull that in. We are going to use our number 5 color next, and I'm going to use a 3mm stylus. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk the dots at an angle out from this center dot. So I'm going to add another center dot with my 3mm tool right above that petal. And I'm going to do this all the way around. If you prefer to use a 3mm rod, that is fine as well. So again, number 5 color, 3mm stylus. I'm going to continue using the number 5 color. I'm going to switch to the other side. The smaller side is 2.5 millimeters. And I'm going to walk the dots at an angle on each side. So I'm going to dip into my paint, and where I'm going, I'm going to stop right at the edge of this large lollipop here. So I can fit 4 comfortably after that center dot. So I'm going to do 4 this way and 4 that way. And I'm going to repeat that pattern all the way around. Then we're going to switch to our number 6 color. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down a size with our stylus. So I'm going to use a 1.5 millimeter, same color, number 6, and we're going to do 2 swipes or 2 swoops. And we're going to do that inside the space here. So I'm going to dip and swoop, and then dip and swoop. And we're following the same angle of that V we just created. So dip and pull, dip and pull. You're going to do that all the way around. Now, I said we were going to come back to this space here. I didn't want to bounce around with the colors. So now that we've got our number 6, I'm going to continue using the same stylus tool, 1.5 millimeters. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull swipes inward. So right here we've got these 2 light colors. We've got this petal here. I'm going to add that swipe right here with our number 6 color. So I'm going to dip, and we've got these double dots here. I'm going to start there and pull inward. Go to the other double dot, start there and pull inward. And it creates a little V. I'm going to do that all the way around. And it just fills in some of that extra space we have. So dip and swipe, dip and swipe. All right, we're getting close to the edge. I know we're probably all working a little bit differently with our spacing, so use your best judgment here. I am going to use a 4-inch tool because I can fit that right in the center there. If that doesn't work for you, if you have a lot more spacing, use a larger tool. Okay, it's okay to adjust at this point. It's okay to adjust anytime. Don't be afraid to do that. Okay, I'm going to use my 4mm tool, sticking with my number 6 paint, and I'm adding a dot in the center of this little dip. All right, so 4mm all the way around, number 6 paint. We're going to go back to our number 1 paint. And I'm going to use my 3mm stylus. and we are going to swipe. And this time we are going to start. So we've got this pin here. I'm going to start just, you can see there's like the center just to the right of it, and I'm going to swipe to the right, and then I'm going to swipe to the left. So dip and swipe, dip and swipe. And again, if you need to kind of cheat that to fill in that space, go ahead and do that. I do not work with canvas often, but canvas is really not as swipe friendly as some of the non-textured surfaces that you can dot on. I like to shake things up a bit, so certainly I think this turned out nice on the canvas. But you just have to modify the way you work based on what you're working with. So I have to encourage those swipes a little more. So that is it for the base of the design. I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to leave it as is and let it dry for a few moments, and then we're going to do top dots next. So I'll see you in the next video for the top dots. All right, it's top dot time. So anytime I teach, I really encourage my participants to, if you're comfortable, decide where and what you want to do for top dots. But if you'd like to replicate the pattern exactly as I have it, I'll walk you through that. For my top dots, I want to, sometimes I like to be like really shake the colors up and make the top dots apparent. I think I'm going to go a little more low key this time. So I'm going to start with my very center circle, and I'm going to use a 2.5mm stylus. And the center circle is my number 6. So I'm going to go down a color, and I'm going to make top dots with my number 5. So 2.5mm, number 5, and I'm going to top dot this center circle here. We're going to go all the way around this ring. Make sure you dip and dot each time. Now we know this ring is colored 5. I'm actually going to skip that. This ring is colored 4. So I'm going to go down a color and we're going to put 3 on top of there. So I'm going to flip to my 3mm side. If you have a 3mm stylus, you can also use that, or a 3mm rod, you can also use that as well. Totally up to you. So I'm going to use my number 3 paint and my 3mm stylus. And I'm going to make a dot inside each of those petal dots, the center of the petal. All right, then we're going to go down to our number 2 color. So this set of double dots is a number 1. So I'm going to use my number 2 color on that 3mm stylus. So dip, and I'm going to dot in the center there, dip and dot. When I do top dots, sometimes I'll do a very dark color on top of a light color, a very light color on top of a dark color. And so this time I'm really enjoying just the subtlety, using colors that are very similar, just a little different. I've gone all the way around that ring with the double dots. I'm going to continue using the same tool, 3mm, in the same color, my number 2. And I'm also going to add a dot here in the middle of this petal. So the center dot gets another dot right on top. And we do that all the way around. All right, next we're going to work on this large pin right here. It's 8mm. So I'm going to get my 5mm tool and I'm going to use my number 4 paint. So we're going to dip and dot in the center of each pin. Now it's hard to see on camera, it's a really subtle color difference, but here in person my eyes can see it. And when the paint dries, we'll be able to see it. So we're going to go all the way around with the 5mm tool and the number 4 color. And the last set of top dots is 2.5mm, still number 4 paint, and we're going to add a number 4 dot right on top of this little guy on the edge. 2.5mm stylus, number 4 color. And that is it for top dots. So I'm going to close my paint. I don't need any of that now. What I want you to do is let this dry completely. So give it a couple hours, okay? And then what we're gonna do is you're gonna lift the mirrors off, and then gently you can use a wet baby wipe, a wet paper towel, you can use a wet paintbrush, but what you wanna do is after it's completely dry, we're gonna wipe off those guidelines and the chalk marks, okay? And then we're gonna come back and I'm gonna show you in the next video, it's real easy how I glue on the mirrors. So let your piece dry completely, get rid of the guidelines, and I'll meet you in the next video. All right, so my piece is completely dry and I've removed all of the grid and marking lines, and it's time to glue these mirrors on. What I would recommend, the glue that I use most often is Gorilla Glue Super Glue, and I really think that it adheres really well. I've never had an issue with anything coming off when I've used this. If you're really averse to super glue, you could use tacky glue. Just make sure after you create it that you do treat it with care, because you know it could get damaged. Tacky glue does really well, but it's a little less strong than the super glue. So those are the two glues that I would recommend. And I would start with your middle piece. And gluing is not rocket science here, but you want to make sure you get plenty of glue on your surface. I don't put the glue up near the edges because when I push down on my mirror, it's going to spread out a little bit. So just make sure you have it centered and where you want it before you push it down. With super glue, you have to work fast. With the tacky glue, you have more time, but just make sure you've got it in place. And then what you're going to do is just glue the mirrors on all the way around. So that's what you're going to see me doing here. Now I like to glue down my mirrors before I varnish. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that before we finish. I like to varnish with Decoart Triple Thick. And I don't put this over the mirrors. So I'm going to put my mirrors on first. And then what I'm going to do is get a paintbrush. And I'm just going to get real close to that mirror, but I'm not going to go over the top of it. You can varnish over mirrors, but it does sometimes leave where you can see the bubbles or maybe some brush strokes. So I just don't do that. Now, if you want to put something over the mirrors, you can absolutely use resin, but make sure before you resin anything reflective that it's completely clean, because if you have fingerprints or smudges or anything like that and you resin over the top of it, you are gonna seal those in place, and those will always be visible. So just make sure that your mirrors are completely clean. I prefer to have my mirrors glued on well and not varnished. So that's what I do. I just varnish around them. And you'll see here I'm just placing my mirrors. I've got a little dollop of glue, and I'm just going to work my way around, adding these on one by one. And here we go, the last piece. There we go. So like you can see here that I've got smudges and some fingerprints on my mirror, so I would definitely not want to resin over that. You want completely clean mirrors if you choose to resin. Now, if you've followed me for any amount of time, you know I absolutely hate resin. I hate working with it, so I choose not to. I'm going to use my triple thick, and I'm going to go ahead and put a layer of varnish on this, and you'll see I'm going to work around the mirrors. If you choose to go the triple thick route, you should apply it in a nice thick layer. You want it to be a little bit milky as you put it on. It will self-level and the milkiness will clear up. You can see I'm just working around this mirror here. I'm going to go right up to these mirrors, but I'm not going to cover them with the varnish. So I just go right up to the edge. And there you have it. Hello, there's our Grecian goddess piece. I cannot wait to see yours and see what beautiful colors you created yours with. Please share with me in the share space, or you can join me on Facebook. You can tag me at Teralyn Pugh Artist, or you can join the Mandala Artist USA Facebook group, and you can share with us in there, as well as any other pieces you create. So I would love to see what you've got, and I'll see you next time, everyone.